Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's talk from Nikolai Chesalin, the ultimate kit for remote work for BAs, product managers and consultants. Hope you've been enjoying the talks that we've seen so far today. You're in for a real treat. I have seen a bit of a preview of this one, loads of good content coming up. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded. And if you have any questions as we go through, please do post them into the Q&A. You'll see other people's questions popping up in there as well. If you see a question you particularly would like answered, then do remember to click on the little hand symbol and vote for that question as well. There is a contest for the best question, and we do recommend that you put your name against the question so that we know who asked it. Just a quick introduction to Nikolai. He's worked in the high-tech industry for a decade. He's acted as information architect and BA for Fortune 500 companies and some big non-profit organizations as well. He's currently living in California, where he's a principal experience designer for EPAM. Over to you, Nikolai.
Hello, guys. Glad to be here today. And today I'm excited to share with you some thoughts, some ideas that I gained through the past more than 10, probably even more than decade years. So the topic of my presentation today is the ultimate kit for the remote work. But before we will jump to the wonderful tools and tool sets, I want to tell you that it's not exactly about the toolkit. We will get to that point. It's what kind of problems we solve as BAs, product managers, all kind of consultants. And a couple words about me. I just want to add to the things that Gordon already said, that I will be happy to continue this conversation over email. You can message me in LinkedIn or any other social network. My name and last name is the same everywhere, so feel free to contact me. And here we go. So today we will talk about remote work, but before we will jump in the core of the content, I want to be very clear what kind of remote work we're talking about. First of all, remote plus partial remote in office will work like this for years. I personally work in this setup for the past 7 years. So with this crisis situation, it was a slightly different change for me, but it also was a change for me because now it's not just remote. It's kind of isolation from your team, from your clients, and you're also limited in think what you can do. And this is very important that today I will focus specifically on the situation when you've never had a chance to talk with your stakeholders, never had a chance to talk with your clients or your team. So completely isolated, completely remote. And let's see what we have in such situation. So our approach and our agenda of this topic today, we will go through the journey. What kind of problems, what kind of specifics we have when we work in such setup. And you will see that even if you already have a tons of amazing tools, methodologies, templates, it's not always work exactly like you think it works, because there are a number of small and huge things that affect how you work, how you drive your product, how you engage with your team. And we will go through all these steps today. So when you work in isolation, you don't have too much luxury to know such things as a personality of your team or specifically of your client. You don't have very clear understanding what's going on that end. The only thing that you have, they came to you also by the remote channels, emails, public information, some other insights, and we will cover this piece as well. So I want to start regard our journey from organization. Just imagine for a moment that depending on our organization, your client that you've been working or you just start working, the experience completely could be completely different. Some organizations, just by the nature, they are not very flexible in terms of remote work, not because they don't have the technologies, but because of security restrictions and other specific things. It doesn't mean that it will not work. It's just a completely different process. And before you will jump in and say, hey guys, let's start from the ideation session. I have a wonderful setup. Let's do this. First of all, you need to do a very important first step. Observe your ground and put your foot in the land of organization that you're going to work with or for, and understand what is your virtual workspace, how you will collaborate with the client. And opposite to a very high-end, high-tech organization with all technologies inside, it might be a very good company without any technology, high-tech technology presence. And in this case, you might need to work with old school things. From my experience, even when it was office plus remote, things like regular post office, regular calls, it's also part of the work that you can do. But this is very important. You need to ground your area, how you work with the client, with your specific client or your team, and find the common ground. When you understand what you can do and what you cannot do, next it's a product or service or a group of products that you will working on. It could be a digital product, a physical thing, or some virtual product like this car from Back to the Future. It was kind of a virtual product that was implemented in the movie. So based on the nature of this product and specifics of it, there's also tons of things that you can do and you will not be able to do. If we are talking about physical thing, you need to establish channel, how you can bring your things and return your things with modifications. Interactive sessions with the physical things. Or if you have a very complex project with the tons of components, you have other limitation of the complexity. So as you can see, step by step, you basically have like a limitation what you can do and what you can't do. And if you will jump from this point and say, okay, I need a communication tool and I need my product backlog and all other typical things that you can Google, say, product management toolkit. Unfortunately, from my experience, and not only from my experience, most likely it will not work. Because let's say if organization with not very heavy presence of IT or technology people will bring to you a guy who somehow connected with the computers and will be able to connect with you through the typical channel of digital channels of communications, you can spend good amount of time, create meaningful work, and in the end, when it will be presented to a key stakeholders, it will not fly. So important takeaway from here, then when you build your structure, your foundation for the tools for your ultimate kit that you're going to use, you need to identify key stakeholders and who will make a decision. Otherwise, you will do a meaningful work in the workspace, in the language that will be not very connected with people who actually can make this thing happen. Even when I used to work as a normal employee and visit clients meetings in clients office. I remember one very huge financial client that part of the process was to present paper documentation on a daily basis. So when we finish all our interaction sessions, by the late evening, I need to prepare a package of updated documents because the person who really makes the decision, he didn't like computers. And we created a special, simple annotation system when he was able, he was the CIO of an organization, just to mark yes, no, or other things. Basically, what we have today in almost any communication digital tool. Okay, so this is how we move to the people. It's your team, client, third party, how you communicate with the people. I briefly covered that all people are different. They have a different background. And the beauty when you're all in the same room, you can establish meaningful personal connections and quickly find a common ground, how you can speak to each other. When you're remote, even with video, even with all digital channels, it's not very easy. And more important, it takes much more time. Think like immediate interactions are important. This is why remote things good, but we need to take in account these limitations. So what's the point here? Is it possible to establish a productive tool set with all kind of different people? Yes, but you need to take in account people specifics, and the key takeaway here, that things should be as simple as possible. Always remember that people don't want to spend too much time, because in the very end of the journey, they will see wonderful framework. They have a tons of other things, and simplicity is a key. And of course, all other regular constraints, like you have a schedule, you have a budget, you have a scope, and when we work on a product, it's very important to always remember quality and specifics, because very often the quality of the outcome significantly affect future of your existing or future product. So all these limitations shape your unique things. And I call this like a blank project. When you start a new product, you need to create your framework of creation frameworks, your virtual workspace where you take in account all the things. Because if you will start using some tool and you will not think about even these four, and we have a couple more layers, most likely something will go wrong, and because the cadence is very fast, you will not be able to fix and adjust. And remember, all these people, they are not very good with the change management on the road. This is how we could have these. Oops, sorry. This is how we could came to different sorts of problems. And now, special topics. As I mentioned, some of these topics could be more like on negative side, some of them on a positive side when we work remotely, like personalities. We need to spend more time developing our personal relationship with the people who could be on another part of the world, or for some reason they don't want to share something. Very often, especially senior people, they are not very good in being open. So you need to spend a lot of time in preparation. And one of the takeaways here, that preparation of using something like inside of organizations, inside of people, all kind of information, all kind of analytics that you can gain and do your homework, is extremely important here. Global locations. This is actually could be your plus rather than minus, because if you establish a virtual workspace, the difference between virtual workspace and the office, that office typically works on everyone in the room, and virtual space could work even part of the team not present. They have a nighttime, they have a rest, holidays, etc., etc. And another thing that I want to mention here are the standards. Standards, all kind of things, and I want to remind you our bottom layers like security standards, culture. For me, it's more like a standards as well, because in many organizations there is a special code how they approve or reject things, especially in the product area. And all these layers of our blank project came to the thing how we define our ultimate key for work. So I will repeat that before we will start using anything, it's better to think about this from the very beginning. It doesn't matter is it a huge corporation or you work on your pet project. Think about your future stakeholders or your potential investors. Typically, if you work on your pet project that potentially could be a successful startup, you need to have something at home that you can very quickly and easily connect to your potential investors or somebody who might work for you. So again, the key here is simplicity. I had a number of examples from companies who had a possibility to use very expensive tools and technologies, but they didn't use them. A number of well-known mobile applications from giants like Microsoft or Apple, they've been creating using simple things like paper or PowerPoint slides or any alternative of the things. And let's repeat this again, just to go through a little bit slowly why the learning curve is so important. Imagine that you have 6 different type of people on your project. Somebody think very structured. Somebody prefer some creative, open space of using things. Somebody very good with a schedule. And on the client side, typically they're not very good with the schedule at all. And availability in every single SOW that I saw in my life, it was a topic that the client promises that he will provide his representative at the best possible, at his best, so people will be able to communicate and validate. In virtual space, it's at least 10 times harder just to find the right person, make sure that he is available. Because when you step in the room, hi, John, do you have a minute? I have a quick thing to check. Virtual etiquette is different. And the latest products from Facebook, like Rooms, it's kind of an attempt to do this. But more different cultures just multiply every single time 10 times of the complexity. So the simplicity should be, so the way how you use things should be even more simpler than you've been using these things before. So always try to simplify your operational overhead. Now, we came to the thing. We go through the journey. Let's try to imagine what could be our ultimate toolkit for the things. And after this presentation, I will share a complete list of the things that I use. In these slides, you will see some of them. I just want to go briefly to the well-known names, because I can imagine that you decided to join my session and talk about what the best way to collaborate or how I can measure the productivity or something like that. And now I'm talking to you about some operational things, relations between people, how it's important. Um, this is kind of my insight from my work and from other product managers in industry. And part of my job, and this will be on the next slide, I constantly learn how other people work to improve my own framework. This is a kind of a part of my blank project. Constantly learn from the best, trying to achieve better results faster and simpler. So when we start with ideation or our first baby steps on a project, and we want to define like a high-level view of our potential product or service. At this moment, you need to have a collaboration in things. So first of all, you need to do a handshake. It could be some instrument like Zoom, Slack, Microsoft Teams, what we're using at this right moment, not just to communicate visually with your voice and text, but you can share something. Remember old days, like, yeah, email, we still have this, but important thing, meaningful thing, it's a speed of interaction and how you communicate with somebody in real time. Because when you're in the room, you can draw things easily on a wall or just sit together and draw something together. This is why if you will check any tool, even that wasn't designed for cooperation or ideation, they have an option to connect to each other and work together on something. So you will see a small icons of your colleagues or your clients who work together on the thing. And here, it's not even beginning, because to start this is a key thing. And the ultimate, or at least most simple solution that exists today, when you can share something with a very short link, ideally that you can send or even spell by the phone, please join bit.ly 3572, and somebody in the very end of other angle of this world can say, yes, I can see your screen, even if you can't share the screen. Because I've just recently had a situation that for some reason, connection from Microsoft, I don't remember, it was a Teams or Zoom, more important that we are not, it wasn't possible to connect like it was planned, but I was able to share the link and be on the regular phone. So we spent some time working on the canvas. Another example, and going forward, it was a Miro or real-time board, and it's a huge class of applications. I call them infinited canvas for collaboration. And all major players in service design and experience design, they start using this, like Miro, IDEA, Mural, and I believe in my list I have at least 15 names that I've tried and recommend to use. But the point here that when you start using infinited canvas, you need to simplify and say, hey, there is a bunch of features here, but let's just focus on simple things. And the catch here, if you overwhelm your co-collaborator, your client, or anybody who is interested in this, most likely they will not use this without you. And the key point, wherever channel you will establish, at least people should be very easily to connect to this channel, even if you just call me, hey, please check my update, link 523. In ideal situation, they would love what you establish with them and will use them on a daily basis. For one of the clients that I've been working on for some time ago, we've been using prototyping tool, and it was the best scenario with a specific client because say, I don't want any documentation, I don't want any ideation session, just show me your constant progress. And as far as I remember, we've been using TestFly even before Apple bought this tool, but the point was that the connection with the feedback that we on the sprint one, we implemented blank screen just with the button feedback. And for that particular stakeholder, for that client, it was a way to to say what he likes, what he wants. So Infinity Canvas, it's not a silver bullet, but today, by large, I think it's one of the common things. In comparison with the traditional things like Confluence, Trello, Jira, etc., when you document things, it's very nicely structured. You have a dashboard, etc. But the curve of learning, remember that simple curve of learning is so dramatically different. Because even if you've been working with Jira or Confluence for years, when you can visually identify with something new, you can go and start collaborate when you literally deal with the things. Another important thing here is how you treat your data. So if you establish a ground, your handshake protocol, you can collaborate, even if it's just like drawing together or sending an email to each other. It's important that the subject that you discuss, like data, will be the same. It's actually a topic of another separate presentation. I just want to highlight a couple ideas from that all members of your team, and especially when you deal with the client, should work with the same set of data. It could be some imaginary set of data. It's not necessary to be like a real client's name or something like that, but you should articulate the same language, the same vocabulary. A couple more examples before we move next. Roadmaps and all other important things of product management. I put here a couple well-known examples. I'm pretty sure that you at least try to work one of them, and they're all great. The key thing here, and this is why I put them here, that if you will go through your own blank project, you will see how much time for each move on your Kanban board or something people spend. And if it's acceptable in terms of your defined structure, in terms of your blank project, it's good, it's perfect. But if you just need to draw a simple thing like roadmap, things like PowerPoint or Google Docs or anything even simpler will be more than enough. You know, interesting statistic that the guru of product management, they never use something more difficult than Excel and PowerPoint, or even simpler, because they spend their energy and time on working with the people and thinking about the real problems, how to find new channels for your product, to identify performance issues, like meaningful work. But if your product or your product is so complicated and people like to use one of these or another tools, then yes, start using this. Just remember about the learning curve. If let's say 10% of your team need to spend significant amount of time, and more important, they switch, let's say, from Google experience to Microsoft or something like that, you potentially have a risk. And this is a kind of a risk that people not always think in the beginning. Now, a couple examples from my one of my key areas like a design and user experience. Today, we see that robots very soon will draw design systems for us. And I even saw a couple examples. If you will check, for example, Block from Lyft, they've built such examples. And as far as I remember, Microsoft as well. But it's not a point. The point is that when you establish some layer of communication, let's say in user experience discipline, you need to connect this piece to your entire infrastructure of product management. And simplicity is also key. For example, I put a mobile application. From Unreal, actually, you can use just a camera. An idea is very simple. You draw something, you make a photo, you connect this in application, nicely do a click-through prototype. For this, you don't need even a special application. You can do this using Keynote, PowerPoint, or something like that. And this is a kind of a trick. If you like some tools, because of some very special feature, try to think how you can achieve this functionality, this feature, without entire product. Just like an example that I tell you. The same situation actually with Kanban and other templates. Let's switch here. I really like templates, and I hope you will love them too. I put a couple examples in a PDF that I will share. You will have like tons of templates, as I promised. But the point is that the typical strategy for consulting firm or firm that builds tools like Miro or IDEO, they put some knowledge together with this tool, and they show, hey, you can build an amazing business model canvas using our tool. Very often it's true, and here you can see a couple of very nice examples that visually can help you to deal with this. But an idea that most likely a system like Mural or something similar already have this, or even if they don't have, all you need, again, just a paper, import image, and draw over this sample. So summarize this. If you find the template that works for you, digitalization of this template, and connect this template to your infrastructure, typically it's much more easier to do this rather than to install huge giant suite of tools just to have an access to nicely implemented functionality of work with the templates. I've been involved in a very interesting project when I was at university. So at that moment, imagine no iPhones. Age was a big deal. But people use the same technique that people use today with all these modern digital tools, using simple Xerox. They just do this technique that Walt Disney introduced with the cartoons, and they done a lot of corrections using simple Xerox machine. Of course, not everything is possible to do this, and on the left side, you see an example from analytics, which is a completely different world. This is why I put like a quite complex and quite simple implementation things. So, analytics. When you do your homework in preparation with your client, or when you already have a product, you want to measure your key KPIs. You want to understand what's going on with it. And the first part of my list, I believe, well known, Google Analytics. Another part of Google Suite, like Tag Manager or Firebase. But I want to put your attention on 3 of these items. And potentially you can use them in completely different way, how they were not designed at all. And this is one of my tricks, to reuse things that were designed for a specific need of another group of people. For example, Alexa.com, now it's an Amazon company. It provides to you a set of tools to do a SEO optimization of your website or your portal. But in the same time, it gives you amazing insights regarding people who use your product or your website or similar websites. And you basically can simulate and identify how people, what kind of people deal with your competitors, or how people search things. And there is almost zero connection with the initial purpose of this tool. So this is one of my favorite hints. If you can identify things that have been designed for something, but you can reuse them in a different way, I think it's a perfect combination. Even industry, we have a couple examples in industry when giant companies like Microsoft design something for one purpose and then reuse them for completely different. I'm talking about Microsoft Visio. Originally, it was designed for all kind of diagrams, your home planning, etc. And only in the latest 3 or 4 versions, they officially introduced tools for user interface prototyping. But tons of people, like guru of information architecture and product design, like Nick Fink, they start using these tools like from the very first versions, just because they have a double or triple functionality for the needs when you deal something with the products. A good inspiration for simulations could be movie industry, because people don't want to spend too much time to produce something or destroy like a real things, and they try to wave a way to do a simulate things. Idea here we have similar idea. And another example in my list, one of my favorite, Wolfram Alpha. It's a simple interface for the Wolfram system, Wolfram language. It's also one of the largest, or probably the largest, database of semantically connected facts. So when you start learn new domain expertise, of course, it's important to read books, different courses, etc. But when you can connect meaningful data in a simple way with the subject that you discover or you're going to build product with, it's important to have something live that you can easily validate. For example, let's imagine you want to build a tool for flight tickets booking, and you want to understand like data of flights, etc. In Wolfram Alpha, you can do this in a couple lines of plain language text, and it can give you insights. And it's very interesting that people like to use insights like statistics from Apple App Store or Android App Store. People like to use statistics from Product Hunt, but other things that are not specifically designed for the product needs, very often they are much more powerful. Summarize. I just try to give you a taste of some of the things that you can use when you establish your Blend projects of Ultimate Kit. After this session, I will provide like a detailed list of things that I use. And finally, but definitely not the least slide, it's education. And this is that I want to put your special attention. Even if you spend significant amount of time in industry, it's important to adjust your educational framework, your ultimate educational framework, with every single new project, every single new product or service that you work on. And I have also a list that I will share with you, a number of people who inspired me. Probably you know them, some of them probably will be new for you. Things that I recommend to attend, like different conferences, and different educational materials. So I believe that's all for now. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer to them.
Thank you, Nikolai. So we have had a number of questions that have come in whilst you've been talking. People have been voting on them. If you haven't voted on the questions already, then please do put your votes against them. But I'm going to go through them in most popular order. So the top voted question is, from your personal experience, have you used gamification to get the team to know each other and to improve collaboration?
Oh yeah, it's a very good question. I really like it. Not always. Remember, like constraints, it's not always possible. But if you have such a luxury of time and possibility and inspiration, gamification is certainly one of the key drivers today, not just in communications in the team, but how you connect with the client. For example, remember the time when Google announced Google Glass? I've been using Google Glass to engage with the client and create a simple prototype just to do UX research with the client. And just because the client liked the idea that, oh, we can play with the Google Glass, we gain tons of user insights. Yes, definitely yes.
Excellent. Next question, can you share any tricks on how to build team spirit when working remotely? How can you help all team members stay involved and devoted to the project?
As I said, the entire topic was about how to put this pass. I can share a couple quick hints from my experience. First of all, people for sure need to be committed to the things. If people are not committed, they could disagree, but if they are significantly on a different level of engineering culture or different culture, this is like a most likely no of success. I understand that I'm saying how not to do things, but this could save you time. It's important to believe in the idea of your product that you do and contribute. I personally, when I introduce a new project for a new team, I try to understand what is the personal plan, personal interest in something. Let's say front-end developer, he don't care about, potentially he don't care too much about the specific client, but he is crazy about new technology. And if you can translate the value of this project or product for each particular participant, convert value in his own currency, this is a potential win. At least from my experience, 99% it works very successful. And it's true, it's an open contract between you and other participants in your team.
Cool. We've got a couple of questions which are actually quite similar from Ingmar Umans and Alberto Saldana. So Ingmar's question was, you advise real-time interaction like chat or instant message over email, but other parties advise to block time like all morning to get actual work done and protect from constant interruptions. And Alberto's question is similar. So does the remote setup increase the number of daily meetings, reducing the time for hands-on work? So what's your view on that?
It's a part of the problem that I described in the beginning. Remember my example, like when you stand in the room. So the success of the Slack was of not just instant messages, but communication on interesting topics. But in the same time, calibration and meetings are important. My personal strategy to minimize amount of meetings, and it works when the overall culture of communications inside the team more or less on the same level. You typically need more meetings if you want to bring attention and if people do not follow the protocol. I was able to observe a number of cases, not only from EPAM, when people work completely remote, but because like they initially say, hey, this chat is not just a chat, it's like a real conversation. When people commit to it, it's meaningful and people don't need extra meetings. But it's important when new team members or you want to share. One of the things that I practice, I call this Instagram. In different channels, I ask people and myself as well to share what was done for today in the way how they want to share, because it's very important to recognize people. And when you're in isolation, it's important to observe the work. Imagine person spend like nights of some part of a code or some new meaningful transition in experience. And if it's just, oh, I've done my jar ticket XY3, it's not the same. Like I say, look at this. And virtual conferencing, meetings, Slacks, etc., it's a perfect opportunity to share what you've done so great. So my answer, less meetings is better, but we still need them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one I would definitely agree with. I mean, your first question when you're organizing a meeting should be, does this actually need to be a meeting in the first place? But as you say, that equally applies whether it's in an office or whether it's remote. Couple more questions. One is, how do you balance between work and family in a remote framework?
I like this question. As I mentioned before, I used to work remotely for the past 6 or 7 years. And it's not just your personal life, it's also about yourself when you work remotely. And it's not just my observation, people work more, obviously. And yes, I agree, it's important to stop these activities, at least for some physical exercises or spending time with your family, friends. The best way how I do this, I just try to block calendar for the personal matter of time and be committed to your own calendar. So if it's blocked, it's blocked, even if it's extremely important meetings. It's a part of the trick of moving from real space to the digital. Until you start believing in this, it's still kind of a game and it's not real. The same thing with the commitments to a family of things like that. And the practical takeaway, try to use different spaces, even if it's just one apartment or one house, because when you stand up and try to do things in a different place, it helps you to reconfigure yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So despite the virtual background, I'm actually sitting in my dining room. So yes, if you can have that dedicated space, it certainly helps you delineate that. And I think there's also the importance of distinguishing work from home from actually work from anywhere. And I'm sure you've had this experience as well. Sometimes, for particular kinds of work, a particular environment works well for you. Do you find that for you? Do you do different kinds of work in different environments?
Oh yeah, and I believe we both share the same thing. When we used to fly, and you have like 10 hours or more in isolation to think, it's also a good environment just to think something in complete isolation. But again, it's important to differentiate when you work on some deliverables and things, and you just to think. And it's almost impossible to stop thinking, especially in the area as a product management, wherever you do. I personally, a lot of ideas came to me when I walk or do some sport exercises, and it's okay. It's just important that not trying to wake up during the night and start working wherever it needs. There is an opposite thing to this story. Then people say, hey, I'm not working from this to this hours, even if I received an urgent meeting. This is another side. So common sense should be present. If somebody said, hey, your competitor just announced new feature, at least you should somehow to respond to this, right? Not 10 hours after.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's another one of those things that's often recommended is essentially creating a team charter. So when you're setting things up, you're agreeing between you how you're going to respond, what channels, what responses people can expect if there is something urgent like that, how they can sort of get hold of you if something really does need attention. One final question that we've got in the Q&A, which is, and I think this is probably a fairly straightforward answer, is it possible to maintain the same level of productivity when we switch from isolation to remote to the office?
Very tricky question. I will try to answer as best as I can. I think it depends what kind of the protocol that you establish. Because I've done this before, not like from the complete isolation, but I tried different mixes, like pure work from home with all nice environment and set of things, and work in the office. If you maintain the typical problem, it's your protocols, your protocol with the team remote, and when you're on site on the client, in the client office, for example. If you will not be able most likely to keep all things. I just try to be very honest and open about this, but it's in your power to bring good things from your isolation experience to your office experience, like eliminate unnecessary meetings, even if you're now in the office and you can spend time together. Instead, spend more casual time outside, things like that. I would say if you've been working productively remote, most likely it will not hurt you much when you're back to the office. It's like a sport or any other skill that you need to maintain. You need to maintain your protocols, your commitments, and your culture inside your team, inside your organization.
Excellent. Thanks, Nikolai. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions that we had in there. We did get a comment. Instagramming is a perfect initiative. Thank you for that one. Just to remind everybody that the recording of this session will be available on the Communities Ed platform. The deck will also be available on there. So there's several of the questions which I haven't read out quite deliberately because they're sort of questions about what's the best tool for a particular situation. And I know as you went through the deck, there's lots of examples of links in there and the tools that you've recommended. So if those of you that asked those questions, I would recommend that you have a look at the deck when it comes out and it's got what Nikolai's recommended tools are. Would also remind everybody, please, to continue this discussion in the discussion group. I am just going to drop the link to the discussion for this particular talk into the chat now, so you should be able to see that. So on the Communities Ed platform, there are discussions around each of these talks, and I know Nikolai would be very happy to pick up and follow up with any of you on there. And the slide deck's got his contact details as well. So that brings us to the end of that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to Nikolai for an excellent presentation, and we look forward to seeing you on a future session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gordon. See you later. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.